Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Mid Suffolk District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor Susie Morley, leader of Mid Suffolk District Council. May I please remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please remember to use the chat function only to indicate that you wish to speak and not to post comments or questions. And please note that messages in the chat panel can be viewed by people watching the live broadcast. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I will now ask the Governance Officer to carry out the introductions.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to the Cabinet members, we have Councillor Eban, Councillor Field and Councillor Wellham joining us today. Also joining us are the Chief Executive, the Strategic Director and the Monitoring Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Can I move to the agenda now, please? Item 1 is apologies for absence.
We have no apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any to declare? No, thank you. Item 3 is MCA/20/35. Is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the Mid Suffolk Cabinet meeting held on the 8th of February 2021. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? No. No. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Whitehead proposing and Councillor Flatman seconding. Thank you. So can I now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote?
Thank you, Chair. Members, if you can select the plus sign on the top right-hand corner of your ModGov app. The vote for the minutes is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That's 9 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much. So the minutes of the meeting have been confirmed and will be signed at the next practicable opportunity. Item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or the Joint Audit and Standards Committee. I'll now invite Councillor Wellham, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. On the 15th of February, the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee reviewed the Local Citizens Advice Service. We received a report from the corporate manager communities and a presentation from the 3 Chief Executive Officers of Mid Suffolk, Sudbury and Ipswich Citizens Advice. Committee noted that the Citizens Advice Service to I had not been provided from DIS and Thetford CA during the current year, and Mid Suffolk CA are putting in place an outreach service into the former bank. Members suggested that the funding allocated to, but not claimed by DIS and Thetford Citizens Advice should be reallocated to Mid Suffolk Citizens Advice as the sole Citizens Advice provider in Mid Suffolk. Committee heard how workload at CAs had increased during lockdown. There were many reasons for this, including a reduction in residents' income due to furloughing and reduced working hours, redundancy, debt due to loss of income, fear of loss of home, stress caused by spending more time indoors with family members, fear of abuse and actual abuse, and lack of facilities for homeschooling. Also, the temporary closure of our customer access points made a difference to their workload. And the loss of free school meals gave pressures, added pressures due to having sort of the extra expense and also the extra effort in providing the meals. CAs had incurred additional costs for providing IT for working from home and screens, etc., which they had to put up in the office because they did have some face-to-face consultations. Committee also heard how CA income from some of their regular funders would not be forthcoming in 2021-22, and Mid Suffolk Community Advice had a funding shortfall for the next year. Members agreed that they had anticipated that CAs would have a 3-year funding agreement, index linked, but there seemed to be some uncertainty as to whether or not the index linking was being applied for 2021-22. At the end of a lengthy debate, the recommendations set out on page 15 were agreed. These are that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is satisfied and notes the content of the report and commend the work of the Mid Suffolk Local Citizens Advice and also the Ipswich Citizens Advice and the Sudbury District Local Citizens Advice. And recommendation 1.2, that the Joint Overview and Scrutiny confirm the previous resolution made at last review, that the 3-year rolling funding arrangements review be subject to indexation on an annual review basis, finances permitting, as a measure of the importance we attach to ongoing local citizens advice funding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wellham. So this report is just for noting, and the issue of index linking will be discussed as part of a wider review with everybody who receives our major grants as part of an ongoing discussion. Thank you very much. Item 7 is the forthcoming decisions list. Does anybody have any comments? No. Item 8 is MCA/20/37 and is the General Fund Financial Monitoring Report for Q3 for 2020 to 21. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce report MCA 2037 on the General Fund Monitoring, which extrapolates the likely outturn for this financial year based on our actual financial performance through the first 9 months of the year. As I repeat every time I introduce one of these financial monitoring reports, it is important that we keep a close eye on our expenditure to date against budget and then carry out a thorough assessment to forecast the outturn for the whole year. This year, our finances have been so complicated by the impact of COVID, the additional costs we've incurred, and the generous assistance given by the central government. In pulling together this report, the finance team have worked hard to put some really detailed narrative against all these many facets, narrative that runs to well over 3 pages of the report, from paragraphs 5.1 to 5.12. The detailed variances are then set out in tabular form in paragraph 6.6, which concludes with an anticipated outturn being a surplus of 1.817 million, which is a significant improvement over that forecasted when the exercise was carried out at the end of Q2. My personal view is that the format of this outturn report, and that's a format that's been tried and tested over many normal years, is not well suited to a situation where the government assistance has come in left, right and centre to so many of our income streams and cost centres. So when the dust has settled and we report the actual outturn for 2021, we will look to see if there is a clearer format in which to report and present this unprecedented year before hopefully we return to more normality going forward. Now, the main items that have increased the anticipated surplus but beyond what we forecast at the Q2 outturn are, firstly, £167,000 less car parking income. Secondly, 370,000 more planning fee income, including that for a proposed large solar PV farm. Third, 259,000 more COVID expenditure. 4, 157,000 MSDC leisure contract saving. And the largest item, 764,000 additional business rates. And these 5 items account for 94% of the improvement. The report also sets out in detail our capital programme with the spend to date, the full year forecast, and the details of the expected carry forward. The numbers are in Appendix D with supportive narrative in paragraphs 614 to 616. Appendices also set out our reserve position and the details of the continuing projects within our Growth and Efficiency Fund. The table papers also show revised and now corrected totals at the bottom of Appendix B. At this point, prior to the year end and establishing the final outturn for the year, the variances are just for noting. The numbers will undoubtedly change again as there remains inherent uncertainty still within the final quarter. I mean, just today, for example, we are recommencing garden waste collection, which wasn't envisaged when this report was written. But I'm pleased to move the recommendations to the effect of noting as set out in paragraph 3.1. I'll be happy to answer any questions arising from the report. Would ask for someone to second these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And it's a pleasure to second the recommendation in this report and to express thanks to Councillor Whitehead for his presentation of the report and indeed for the report itself. And I think once again, there's little to say in a sense about our financial position. It's been fairly well discussed, not least in terms of our recent budget setting meeting. But it is worth, I think, repeating thanks to the finance team for their diligence and hard work throughout the year. And I note what Councillor Whitehead says about the way in which the government, promised government support has appeared. But personally, I think let's just be thankful there was so much of it, even though, and that it appeared at all. And it has helped, though, as Councillor White has said, there's a number of other items that have helped improve our position tremendously. So very much like to second the report. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. Do we have any questions? Councillor Eban.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, John, for your report. Councillor Whitehead, sorry, for your report. I just wanted to ask, on page 27, it refers to the high amount, the £450,000 of variances due to staff management, as in vacancies. And I just wondered if we could have a little bit more explanation on that, particularly when you know, we know we're in a situation where lots of people might have lost their jobs at the moment and therefore be looking for work. And also from the fact that we might, you know, ourselves as a council be wanting kind of, you know, another tree officer, some more enforcement support or housing to update policies and so on. So I just wondered if we could understand, you know, why that variance is so high. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, I'll bring in our CEO in a moment, but I'll just say that obviously the period covers from the 1st of April through till December, and a large part of that obviously was the first lockdown and all the difficulties that created. So I feel there are valid reasons why recruitment had to be put on hold, but if our CEO wants to add to that, I'm happy to.
I think Councillor Whitehead has largely said it all, but absolutely the impact of lockdown did have some slowdown in our ability to recruit, but not entirely. So we have been able to do recruitment through the various periods of lockdown, but it's been very different. It's been remote, virtual type recruitment. Been successful, but clearly is a slower process in terms of replacing staff where there are vacancies. We also went into the pandemic with a higher than usual level of vacancy rates as a result of the management review that had been carried out the year before. So we'd come to the end of that period of time and we had some vacancies. These hadn't yet been appointed to, so we were carrying slightly higher than normal numbers of vacancies as we went through that process. But really, as Councillor Whitehead says, this is a backwards look, doesn't have any impact in terms of what we are now doing in terms of bringing forward other posts, either to replace existing vacancies or indeed to create new posts that would be in addition to the existing complement of staff.
Thanks very much for that. So we're confident we'll see a much lower level of vacancies going forward.
Confident, yes, barring all other things that could always happen to us. So certainly I would assume that we would see a more normal level of vacancy turnover, because that's basically what drives the vacancy rate, is to do with the level of turnover in staff. We've seen a huge amount of loyalty and commitment from our staff through the pandemic, and so I'm confident that will continue. But clearly people retire, people move on, and so if that remains at sort of normal levels, then yes, we would see a reduction in terms of the percentage year on year. If for any reason that were to change, then obviously it would go up slightly higher. It's almost inevitable, I would say, that we're in a situation more often than not where when somebody leaves, there is a delay before the new person can join, just because of the practicality. They might give us a month's notice, but by the time we've been out to advertise, and then they need to give a month's notice to their current employer, that there's always a little bit of a gap. We try and avoid that where we can, but clearly it's not always possible. More often than not, it's more manageable when we know there's a planned retirement. Then obviously we can manage that and try and avoid any gap, and preferably have a bit of a handover, which would be even better, which would then help mitigate some of those cost savings. But yes, as far as I can be confident, yes, I think we can expect to see that come down a bit this year.
Thanks for that, and I certainly agree about the loyalty of existing staff, but thanks very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Field.
Thank you. The business rates position, I was just going to check. I understood a big chunk of the business rates variances were due to a payment for the electrical infrastructure at in Bramford. I notice here that you've reported 404k expected from the business rates pool. I just wondered whether it could be made clear why the large sum of money we received in Bramford was not disappearing into the business rates pool. Is that 404k what remains after such a transfer because the pool has grown, or is there something I'm missing?
Thank you. I'm going to invite in a moment Melissa Evans to answer that detailed question. Can I just, Madam Chair, can I just apologise unreservedly, because I don't think I had my camera on, did I, whilst I was giving my introductory speech? So I apologise if that was the fact.
Oh dear.
Turn to Melissa now.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Field, for your question. I can confirm that actually that benefit into the business rates pool does include the Bramford Power Station coming online as well. So that has been shared amongst the other Suffolk authorities, and that's the element we get to keep out of that. So that is included in there.
Okay, thank you. Just don't want to be negative about it, but they're large sums of money. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm now going to open up the item for debate. Does anybody wish to say anything? Perhaps. No? Oh, the report is just for noting, so I'm now going to ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, once again, if you select the plus in the top right-hand corner of your app, the vote is now in progress. Just waiting for 2 more votes. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 9 votes for, that's carried.
Lovely, thank you very much. Moving on to item 9, this is MCA/20/38 and is the Housing Revenue Account Financial Monitoring Report for 2020 to 2021 quarter 3. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll just check I got my camera on and I'm not reading out the previous introduction. Right, I'm pleased to now give a brief introduction to the Housing Revenue Account quarter 3 Financial Monitoring Report. Again, as with the General Fund, this is based on 9 months numbers, then extrapolated to the year end. Year-end surplus of 2.193 million is anticipated in contrast to the 564,000 deficit budgeted. A table showing these variances by line item is set out in paragraph 6.3, with the narrative behind these variances set out in paragraphs 6.6 to 6.10. By far the largest variance is a 2.604 million favourable variance arising because we have not had to make a revenue contribution to capital. But this figure is unchanged from the Q2 outlook, which I reported back in December. And in the main part of my introductory speech then, I set out a detailed explanation for this variance, so I won't repeat all that again. However, I'm pleased to report that one large adverse variance forecasted in the Q2 outlook, being a significant rental income shortfall from tenants, has been eliminated in this updated outlook. It is explained in paragraph 5.2 and is now in line with the view that I expressed in December when I said that I was hopeful that the shortfall predicted then would actually just prove to be a very prudent assessment that the bulk of those rents due will ultimately be recovered, albeit perhaps over a longer time frame than this current financial year. Paragraph 5.1 refers to additional COVID-19 costs for PPE of 46,000. These have been covered in their entirety by the Coronavirus Response Fund that we received from central government. On the capital side, there's been a significant slippage on the build programme. We are now anticipating a capital carry forward on new build and acquisitions of 7,233,000. Now that assumes that over 9 million is spent in Q4, with a substantial programme of house acquisitions being completed. I'd like to acknowledge the great deal of effort and hard work undertaken by officers ensuring that our right to buy receipts are being spent before the expiry of the government extended national deadline. So as with the General Fund, the variances at this stage prior to year end are just for noting. The recommendation in paragraph 3 is worded accordingly. I'd therefore like to move the recommendation set out in paragraph 3. Would ask the Cabinet Member for Housing, Councillor Lavingham, if she would kindly second these recommendations. Collectively, with the Housing AD and Finance Officers present, we'd be happy to answer any questions arising on this report. Thank you.
Councillor Hedingham.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to second this report, and I would just like to take the opportunity again to thank the housing team for the marvellous hard work they do, and also for Emily Atack for all the work she's done on the right to buy receipts. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now open up for questions. Anybody like to put their hand up? Councillor Field?
Sorry, that's an old hand.
Okay, no questions. So I now open it up for debate. Anybody wish to debate this item? I think I would just like to add my thanks to the housing team as well, and especially to Emily Atack and her team around the massive effort that they put into making sure that our right to buy was all in order by the deadline, because that was quite a mission to undertake, and really do appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Simply to absolutely endorse and second, as it were, what you just said. I think it was a fantastic piece of work, fantastic accomplishment, and it deserves all the recognition it can get.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, your vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous. 9 votes for.
Thank you very much. So I'm now moving on to item 10, which is MCA/20/39, and is the Q3 performance report, performance presentation, Council Tax Hardship Fund. I'm just going to invite our Assistant Director to talk us through this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, councillors. Yes, I'd like to introduce you to our Q3 performance presentation covering period October through to December. You'll see that this presentation follows our new style, which was introduced at the beginning of this financial year and is focused on our 6 key priorities from the corporate plan, as well as our health of the organisation, which illustrates some key themes which ensure the councils are working efficiently and effectively. Taken in its entirety, the report seeks to provide some high-level assurance that the councils are delivering against the corporate plan, highlighting some key performance measures and progress against objectives, with a look forward to planned activity in our next quarter. As is usual, I don't intend to run through the entirety of both presentations, as there's quite a lot of detail in there, but I would just like to highlight a couple of themes that are relevant. The first of which is our desire to continuously improve and review the format and content. I think it's fair to say that with every iteration we are making some progress, both in terms of the content as well as engagement with colleagues across the council. That's not to say, though, that I think there is more we can do to make some improvements. We certainly will be working with colleagues to focus on outcomes rather than pure narrative on what we have been doing. And we also want to maintain a focus on quality rather than quantity. One of the aims when we developed the new style, if you recall, was to try and keep it concise and to move away from the pages and pages of content that we expected everybody to digest. And certainly in this Q3, I can see that we've added a bit to the page count. And for the final quarter, I will be certainly working with teams across the council to address this. We also want to continue to try and bring these presentations to life with a much more interactive content and individual case studies. A second theme is obviously the impact that the pandemic has had during Q3 and continues to have on us, resulting in a heavy focus on COVID response work. Unsurprisingly, our attentions are diverted, which means some objectives and activity has slowed or paused. And we have tried to reflect this in the presentations where this has happened, but equally explaining what activity has taken place instead. You'll see this most noticeably in the wellbeing objective, for example. So that's just by way of a brief summary. Happy to hand back to the chair for any questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? No? So, Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Sarah Wilcock for that presentation, for the work that she does put in, because I know it's very detailed and a lot of work across the organisation. But one of the aspects that I bring up regularly is about our measuring social value and the social return on investment, and with the outcomes that the council is trying to achieve. I just wonder where we're at with actually being able to measure that in terms of social return on investment. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Eburn, for your question. Yes, certainly social value and measuring that impact is something that we absolutely have as a priority moving forwards. We do appreciate that that's one of the significant ways that we can bring to life and bring to light the impact of the work that goes on across the organisation, which isn't necessarily readily available in the measures that we currently use. There's obviously a much greater impact that we can see by taking on some measurements of social value. So happy to say that is on our priority list moving forward, but just is something that we've not got to yet at the moment, but it's certainly something that we'll be looking to include in future iterations.
Thank you very much. I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Thank you. A long report to scroll up and down rapidly while you're looking for things to question. I'm sure you'll find the increase of 28% in compliments received something that's cheering to see, not to complain about. But I was looking at the 160 complaints below that, 18% down on Q2. It's got to be good. It says 74% were not upheld, and of those that were, so that's 26% or so, consisted of one-off errors or process improvements investigated or instigated. Sorry. So are you sort of suggesting there is absolutely no problem there at all? 160 people complained. Not upheld by our own investigation process, presumably. Just a few more words around that would help. Just how do we see that? Because 160 sounds quite a lot compared with 77 compliments.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Field, for your question. Obviously, it's not to belittle any complaints that we receive, and they are all taken very seriously and looked at in detail by independent colleagues in the organisation and corporate managers responsible for those particular services. I think it's fair to say that there is a proportion of complaints that we receive that are sometimes in relation to the actual service that they might have requested. So, for example, a missed bin could perhaps relate to a complaint. I'm happy to go away and provide you some further assurance and detail around those, and we do report complaints on a quarterly basis to the senior leadership team as well. So happy to pull that together for you and share that with you. Obviously, there are some things that do get looked at that do mean that we do want to change a process and take on board a policy or a process change, and that's part and parcel of us trying to learn directly from customer feedback as to how we can make improvements in services going forwards. So whilst it's great that we've had a decrease in complaints, we do keep a close eye on that moving forwards. But are keen to obviously make those process improvements as we go along, and that information is shared each time that we review a complaint with the service that it's attributed to.
Thank you. So the process improvement instigated is after the complaint. It's not sort of suggesting we've already got there. Or...
No, it's as a result of the complaint. There's something has brought something that hasn't worked very well to light, and we've taken that opportunity to work with the service to suggest some improvements to it.
Okay, thank you. That sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. On the same page, the customer feedback, the website feedback bar, it's suggested there that the feedback is about the service rather than about the website. I don't understand how we know that it's about the service rather than about the website. If somebody could explain that, because things like waste collections that are missed, usually they're rectified so quickly that I don't understand from my own experience how there would be a complaint about that. But I can understand that people will find the website difficult to use in order to report a missed waste collection. So if we can be sure that it's about the website and not about the service, I'd be grateful. Or vice versa.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wellham, for your inquiry there. I think it's fair to say that 2.26 out of 5 is not a level that we want to see. We want to see that a lot higher. And we did undertake quite a bit of improvement work over the summer of last year, trying to make our site more accessible in line with some new government regulations that came out. And we continue to work with individual service areas to look at the content that they have on the site to make sure that it's up to date, is written in plain English, and is easily accessible. I think it's fair to say that we do receive a mixed bag of complaints through the customer feedback tool. So people do have the ability to put free text comment when they rate their experience using the emojis that are available. And we do find that the free text comments do sometimes relate to the actual service itself. So, for example, they might pop in that comment box that they're not happy that their bin wasn't collected, or that a planning application was granted. So the feedback tool does relate to those sort of comments, as well as people perhaps who have found the website not as easy and intuitive to use as we would like.
Thank you. Chair, I've got some queries about the communities and about wellbeing. Would you like me to carry on?
Yes.
I mean, they're fairly straightforward, I think. I recognise that communities have been so busy with COVID-19 grants and so on, which rightly were given a very high priority, and I think they did brilliant work on that front during the pandemic. And so there were possibly fewer bids being made for grants, but I'm trying to understand the position in respect of it's just gone from my screen. The grants where it says that 60% of annual capital grant has been allocated. It doesn't say how much of that has been spent. It says it's offered but not spent. That's quite a high figure if it isn't spent, and only quite a small portion. There's still quite a significant portion that hasn't been allocated. Is that still the position on on grants? And the total funding offered, how much is now being spent? What's going to happen to the underspent? Could I have an update, if it is at all possible, on locality grants? I see at the end of December, only 50% of that had been spent, or less than 50%.
Who wants to take this question? I think what we'll do, Councillor Wellham. Oh, Kathy.
Yes, indeed, Councillor Wellham, thank you for your question. First of all, in terms of locality grants, no, they haven't all been spent. And of course, members have to the 31st of March to do that. And I would really encourage members across the board to be getting those bids in. In terms of the amount of money offered against what has now been spent, we will need to take that away and reply outside the meeting. And in terms of generally on grants, in terms of the underspend, more widely, we still do have bids coming in at this point in time. I saw one just earlier this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. And just a query about the wellbeing strategy. There's a reference to the wellbeing strategy. I was just wondering when members and stakeholders will have an opportunity to contribute to the strategy, and if there is a target for completing it. There's lots of strands of work taking place. We can read about those, and will all members be made aware of what's going on? I just think there's a lot of work going on there. I guess it's all good work. There's no reason why it isn't all good work, and it would be good to know a bit more about it, and also for members and stakeholders to have an input into it. May not be something you can answer just now, but a bit more around the way the strategy is being developed would be very useful, please.
Thank you. Kathy, do you want to take that one?
I can make some response to that.
Okay.
Yes, there will be further member engagement in terms of the wellbeing strategy over the next few months, which will build, of course, on the initial member engagement that there was in 2020, where we invited all members to a couple of workshops. And I don't have the exact date to hand, but we would expect that the wellbeing strategy will be completed during the summer at some point.
Could I just one last question? Can we try to make sure that there are actions in respect of encouraging cycling and walking, because there was such an increase in cycling and walking during the lockdown, and I think we've got something there that we can build on. It would just be a shame if we didn't take some action fairly quickly throughout the coming summer to build on that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yep, thank you. And these workshops will not happen prior to the elections, so they'll be after that. Thank you, Kathy. Who else have we got? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask a question, probably more for the benefit of any members of the public who might be watching our meeting. It's how widely are these performance reports circulated? I mean, clearly they are put in the public domain as part of the papers that go out for these meetings that we have in the cabinet. But beyond that, is there any circulation available? Is any circulation carried out by our team to any other recipients?
Not to my knowledge, although councillors are quite welcome to circulate them amongst their parish councils, but I'll ask Sarah to give a more detailed reply. Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. And yes, Councillor Morley's right. There's not a massive circulation list where we send the report out per se. We are looking to obviously make this a report that is much more easily sort of consumable by our residents, which is why we're trying to bring it a bit more to life with some case studies. And what I'd like to see moving forward is sort of more interactive sort of videos and case studies that are presented in a format which is much more engaging. So certainly something that we will be looking to promote more widely. Obviously, they are published as part of any papers, and in previous instances we have found that the press often will pick up on certain things that are included within the report, and obviously that gets some circulation then if it's widely reported. So as we continue to make changes and iterate this performance report moving forward, then we will be looking to extend its publication and hopefully have it in a more engaging format that will be of interest to our residents and communities.
Thank you very much. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Sorry to come back, but a couple of points on the environment sheet. Certainly the first one. Incidents of fly tipping, 124 up from 86. I just wondered what we're doing about that. I mean, it may be buried in the text, but the text is extremely small, somewhat forbidding, which may also impact on your desire for other people to read this. So there's just a comment on that, please. And again, similarly, the 11.57% recycling that was contaminated or too small to process. I wondered, is that up or down or sideways on previous occasions? And again, what are we doing about that? So both those cases, really, what action is underway to ensure those numbers improve?
Thank you, Councillor Field. Councillor Fleming, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Field. These aren't easy questions to answer, actually, because during the pandemic, we have seen a very marked increase in fly tipping. And I think this is partly due to the difficulty of accessing the bring centres, the recycling centres. I think people who had been coming in when you didn't have to schedule a trip, whereas most people are very happy to book a slot. Some people aren't, and I think we're seeing some people who are maybe sort of slipping in with a few extra things, finding that it's more difficult to get rid of their things and leaving them by the side of the road, etc. We do have a no fly tipping campaign going on. We've seen a marked increase in what I would call rogue traders taking people's large items and waste and offering to dispose of them for a fee. And a lot of these people are not registered to deal in waste or scrap, and they simply take them and leave them somewhere. I have been speaking with our waste team and with Suffolk Trading Standards and in fact with the police. And this is something that it's very unfortunate. What we really need is a few really good prosecutions. And I think that's something we're all trying to work towards. And I have to say our team has been remarkably good about collecting evidence, but the courts are extremely behind. You probably know that there's about 1.5 years wait before a hearing can be brought to the court in Ipswich to prosecute people. So all of these things are contributing, unfortunately, to what you see as an increase in fly tipping. In terms of what can be done, I think actually ward councillors can play a really important role. We've got a leaflet circulating, and I hope you've received a copy of it, to try to get the message out to residents in anything you publish that please, if you must give your waste to an entity other than Mid Suffolk, which there is I think it's £60 a charge for a large item pickup, be 100% sure that they're legitimate. And there are ways of checking, but there are also ways of dodging the check. So that would be my message on that. In terms of the recycling rate, I think possibly due to the larger amount of recyclable materials coming through people's homes during the pandemic, there has been an increase in materials going into the recycling bin that probably shouldn't have gone in, things like Tetra Paks, things like glass, things like small pieces of cardboard. And we probably do have more to do in terms of getting that message out. We have a Get Recycling Right campaign, which is sponsored by the Suffolk Waste Partnership at the moment. There are flyers going around, electronic flyers. There are actually physical copies of flyers available from the Waste Service. So get in touch with me or Ollie Fairs if you would like actual copies of the Get Recycling Right flyers. Some of the parishes are being equipped with these flyers, and they're handing out in their new residence packs, because when new people come to Suffolk, they sometimes aren't familiar with the way we recycle here, and it's very useful to have a flyer to put in their pack. Other than that, it's difficult to know how we can reduce the amount of things going in the recyclable waste stream that unfortunately are not recyclable. I think if any of our waste team are on the line and would like to add anything, or any of our officers online would like to add anything to what I've said.
I don't think there
may not be, but
not around.
Councillor Field, does that go some way to responding to you?
I think yes, thank you. It does. I mean, one often wonders whether with the fly tipping, if we provided some facilities where these people could deposit stuff more easily, whether it would have any effect, as you say. Were it that I had something I want to dispose of and I was of the right mindset, I might try and avoid a £60 fee by giving it to someone I know full well is going to dump it down the road. You know, as councillors, we wouldn't do that, would we? But wonders how you change the incentive that people face. And you know, I've often thought that one could put, as a parish, we could put, for instance, a skip in our village car park for you know, 1 week every 2 months or something, and people will get rid of stuff in that way. So is there any innovative way we could resolve the problem? You know, I take the point about punishment, but that often doesn't work. In any case,
I think that's interesting, actually, Councillor Field, because in order for you to do that as a parish council, your parish council would need to be licensed with the Department for the Environment as a recycler.
Yes, right, yeah.
Thank goodness we don't actually do it then. It's just the ideas don't need licensing. Thank you.
But there is possible. Can I just add? I think the new producer responsibility legislation we'll probably see coming in the next year or so will possibly allow a longer term solution to this problem, because I think what I personally would like to see is the manufacturers and sales points for the sorts of goods that we find dumped paying upfront, so that we can provide more expensive and easier to use facilities for retrieving the items when they come to the end of their life, perhaps even attaching value to them. I think it's that circular economy that we need to start to promote in a much more real sense, so that people aren't, you know, incentivized to throw things away wherever they feel like it.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Fleming. So that item was for noting only. So I'm now going to move on to item 11, which is MCA/20/40, and is the Community Infrastructure Levy Expenditure Programme for March 2021. And I'm going to invite the Cabinet Member for Planning to introduce this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This SIL expenditure programme contains an update on progress on decisions in bid rounds 1 to 6, including decisions made in December 2020. Also included is a list of emerging projects for future consideration which are currently developing. From the Cabinet paper, you'll see that there are 5 bids on which a decision is required. All 5 are for Cabinet to make. The details of these are given extensively in, I think it's Appendix B, but there is an awful lot to plough through there. So for I will spend a bit of time going through each one to bring you all up to speed on it. First one is M20-20, which is the Stowmarket Creating Road Depot. This is our depot in Stowmarket, and this is from the Strategic Infrastructure Fund. And the project relates to the provision of a new HVO, hydrogenated vegetable oil fuel tank, or hydrated, vegetable oil fuel tank, alternative low carbon fuel for refuse and recycling collection vehicles. This project provides a high carbon impact saving. It directly relates to the District Council's objectives of the Climate Emergency Declaration. The Council's declared this climate emergency in 2019, and the Cabinet's Carbon Reduction Management Plan was recently published. Proposal 4.3 of the plan states that we will secure the transition of appropriate council fleet vehicles to electric or other zero carbon fuel sources, such as hydro-treated vegetable oil, HVO, as we've called it earlier on. Cabinet agreed in principle to this earlier in the year, the project represents the first step towards this objective and is acceptable waste infrastructure, which is specifically listed in the infrastructure delivery plan and the infrastructure funding statement infrastructure list for Mid Suffolk. That's the first item. The second is M20-24, which is Gislingham School and Community Daily Mile Running Track, and this is from the Ring-Fenced Infrastructure Fund. Now, Gislingham Primary School would like to provide additional infrastructure on the school site to improve exercise facilities and is committed to encourage active and healthy lifestyles. The exercise track would enable pupils, staff, parents and the wider community to exercise more and improve the facilities on the school site, particularly in wet weather. School staff would then be able to introduce the daily mile, as they call it, using the track to encourage daily activity for all pupils. A school running club has also been established and it runs once a week before school. This has proven popular with both pupils and parents who can also join in, but can only operate for half of the year. The exercise track would enable the running club to operate all year round. The running track would also be used by the wider community, including Gislingham Netball Team, Gislingham Informal Running Group and the Playgroup. The completion of a community user agreement will ensure that the use of this facility by the wider community is safeguarded. The amount of SIL funding is regarded as acceptable under the terms of the SIL expenditure framework, as the SIL bid of £18,487.50 and represents 75% of the total project costs and lies within the community infrastructure thresholds of not exceeding £75,000 and 75% of the total costs. This project has been developed on the community infrastructure section within the infrastructure funding statement infrastructure list within Mid Suffolk. Subject to the completion of a community user agreement, this is recommended for approval by Cabinet. The third is M2023. This is a health and administration hub and clinical capacity reconfiguration at the Mendlesham Surgery. And again, this is from the local infrastructure fund. This project aims to provide an extended service to the community of Mendlesham, Bacton and the surrounding area. There would be an increase of clinical space which would allow for other allied healthcare professionals such as a clinical pharmacist, social prescribers, physiotherapists, chiropodists, ultrasound, phlebotomy and mental health link workers or counsellors to provide services to the community using the new space which will be provided. The practice hope that they will also be able to attract hospital consultants to have outpatient clinics at Mendlesham, which would also benefit the community with that service on their doorstep instead of having to travel to the local hospitals. The project also includes a newly designed waiting room and a larger dispensary capacity, which would also benefit the community. There is also the opportunity that the additional services which could be provided would help to improve health prevention. Well, that doesn't mean health prevention, but prevention of injurious impacts to health, which would then have an impact on the health care which will be needed in the future. Improved parking and cycling facilities will be provided through this project for the benefit of the community using the practice together with 2 new EV charging points and cycle racks. The practice is also providing funds towards the project as well as the SIL bid. The project is supported by the Clinical Commissioning Group, the Patient Participation Group and the community. The project has planning permission and is listed as essential infrastructure within the infrastructure delivery plan and is also contained in the infrastructure funding statement infrastructure list for Mid Suffolk. The fourth is in Hawley and it is an improvement and extension of the Ron Craskell Pavilion car park. This project provides an overall improvement regeneration and revitalisation project for King George's Field, Hawley. This will provide a safe sports, community and leisure car park at the Ron Craskell Pavilion by properly extending, preparing and surfacing existing ground currently used for parking, together with the construction of 10 additional spaces. The project has local community and ward and county member support and is one of 2 SIL bids that have been received from this parish to improve and upgrade this community facility. The amount of SIL funding is regarded as acceptable under the terms of the SIL expenditure framework as a SIL bid of £22,595 and represents 67% of the total project costs and therefore lies within the community infrastructure thresholds. This project has been delivered under the community infrastructure section within the infrastructure funding statement infrastructure list for Mid Suffolk. And finally, M20-22, again in Hawley, which is the provision of secure storage facilities at the Ron Craskell Pavilion. This project provides a secure storage facility in the form of a separate building for the organisations which use the pavilion and playing fields, which includes local football and bowls clubs, Scout Group, Royal British Legion and Parish Council. The current storage facility has previously been a target for crime, and this project will satisfactorily address crime risks and seeks to increase the security of storage facilities and should address any future concerns. It has the community and both district and county councillors' support. The amount of SIL funding is regarded as acceptable under the terms of the SIL expenditure framework, as the SIL bid of £39,937 represents 50% of the total project costs and therefore lies within the community infrastructure thresholds. So the recommendation is as set out in your report, paragraph 3.1, that Cabinet is recommended to improve the SIL bids at Stowmarket, Gislingham, Mendlesham and 2 separate bids at Hawley, and paragraph 3.2 that Cabinet is asked to note and endorse the SIL expenditure programme March 2021. Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry it's taken so long to explain all that to you, but I think I did want to try and sell you the individual bids because I think they're all very worthwhile. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Byrne. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Brewster.
I'm happy to second, Madam Chairman. Also, at the same time, I had forgotten that Scouts were mentioned on the Ron Craskell Pavilion, the provision of storage. So I should perhaps declare, although I'm president of Stowmarket District Scouts, I should perhaps declare a non-pecuniary interest in that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Brewster. Do we have any questions from Cabinet members? No? Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's not necessarily, well, it is part of a question, but firstly, I'd just like to say thank you very much to the staff in the SIL team for their support of the volunteer groups in Hawley. Their support has been exceptional, and they've been really, the volunteer groups have actually said to me they're very impressed with the accessibility of the staff and their dealings and so on. So a big thank you to them. And also I should say thank you to the volunteers that put together the bids in Hawley, because I think it's quite unusual in that it's 5 different volunteer groups coming together, which really shows the whole community working together in order to improve the facilities. And I suppose if I was to ask a question, it was to kind of say that I do hope there'll be no changes to the SIL. Can you confirm, as it were, there'll be no changes to the SIL support, because as I say, it has been very good, the support from the team at Mid Suffolk. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Eburn. We'll pass on your thanks to the whole team. Any more questions? No. Does anybody wish to debate this item? No. Okay. So I'll now ask the governance officer to conduct the electronic vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the vote has now been started and is in progress in your app. Thank you. That's 9 votes for, Chair, so that's unanimous.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 12, MCA/20/41, and this is the solar multifunction carport microgeneration. So this report is in 2 parts, and part 1 is the public part of the report, and part 2, the appendices, is confidential. So when we get to the point, please keep any confidential questions until we go into private session. So I will now invite the Cabinet Member for Environment to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you also, Councillor Brewster, for sharing this report. I think it is really a joint report for us. I'm very pleased to introduce our proposals, solar carports to be installed at the Stowmarket and actually the Sudbury Leisure Centre in Baber, which will be a separate meeting by the Baber Council. This proposal reflects the Council's carbon reduction management plan, which states that we will explore opportunities for low carbon energy generation with a view to minimising our reliance on the grid. And this will include options for council-owned land and buildings and other investment opportunities. Furthermore, the Council Strategic Asset Management Plan references that the Council will support the delivery of low-energy projects through proactive asset review of council-owned estates or other investment opportunities. I would also add that when we undertook our first actions on carbon reduction and management, we employed groundworks to assess where our main carbon emissions lie, and we found that our greatest emitters are the leisure centres and the diesel-fuelled waste vehicles. So that this is where the bulk of the carbon savings actually can be made for the councils. So I'm particularly pleased that we're addressing so-called the low-hanging fruit first. I'm also really pleased that we've received successfully received some funding to help us pay for these improvements. As evidenced in our report, the Economy and Regeneration team has successfully bid for central government's Getting Building Fund programme. We have received a promise of match funding up to 50% of the capital grant, capped at £400,000 per site, on the provision that the work is delivered by March next year, March 2022. This award makes a huge difference to the viability and deliverability for the Council and gives a timely opportunity for the Council to demonstrate its local place leadership in respect of the economy and environment. I would add that this project is essentially a pilot using Council assets, and if successful, this whole concept could be deployed by the Council, businesses and developers elsewhere in the district to make a far-ranging and local energy microgeneration effect and a contribution towards the district and county ambitions of carbon neutrality. We have sought specialist advice on the business case and optimal system to support the use of the carports. And you will probably see that this project also includes EV charge points. We're looking at delivering, let me see, 5 fast chargers and 1 rapid charger, at least initially, along with the solar charge points. The project is now linking to a recent further grant for both Mid-Suffolk and Baber for other work, air source heat pumps, installation and roof solar at its leisure estate. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Do we have a seconder?
Madam Chair, I can't get my hand up, but
Councillor Brewster.
I'm very happy to second this. As Councillor Fleming has said, that this is a pilot test in both councils, and with the success of it, I look forward to further sites being developed over the years to bring these solar carports perhaps onto our car parks and where else, you know. So yeah, I'm very, very happy to second.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brewster. Do we have any questions? Councillor Field.
Just a question about the roof solar. I'm sure I read the second paper through in detail. It seemed to be unclear whether you are actually putting solar panels on the roof of the leisure centres as well as on the structures. Is it just that it's separated out for purposes of convenience, or is it one or the other or both?
Councillor Field, were you when you said the second paper? Are you referring to the private one?
The private one, yes.
If we can take questions first on the public paper.
Yeah, it may be in this one as well. I don't think they.
I think that really is in the private paper, probably.
Okay, I'll keep it for that.
I'm happy to hand over to Lee to comment on that.
If we can keep anything from the private session private for the moment. Thank you.
Of course, just to come back on that, the system that's been optimised for the site does include one portion of the roof, which is still being developed. It's the extension. The roof there is a new structure and it's able to take some PV, so it will be 9 sections of carport plus 1 section of roof so far, if that helps clarify.
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Thank you. Any more questions on the public paper? Okay. Does anybody have any questions on the private paper? No? Okay. So
I did have a question on the private paper.
Right. Okay. In which case, what we'll do is we'll go into private session. So item 13 is a resolution to exclude the public, which term includes the press, and that's to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below, on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against each item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of this agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Do I have a proposer to go into private session? It needs to be a cabinet member. Councillor Brewster, yes?
Happy to propose that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming, are you seconding that?
I'm happy to second, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll now ask the governance officer to conduct the electronic vote to go into private session.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, members, your vote to go into private session is now in progress. Thank you, members. Chair, that's 9 votes for, we could just wait for Rob to confirm
Thank you, everybody. Welcome back into our public session. So we are now on item 12, which is MCA/20/41, and is the solar multifunction carport microgeneration. And I'm now going to ask the governance officer to conduct the electronic vote for this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Okay, thank you. That's 9 votes for. That's carried, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that's the last item on our agenda for today. So the date and time of the next meeting is scheduled for Monday, the 10th of May at 09:30. Thank you very much, everybody. Rob, can you please confirm when the live stream's finished?